one of those really critical pieces for anyone that's sort of venturing into this entrepreneurial space to, like, it's great to have a list of all the optimism and the positivity and what we're going to do. But, I would recommend having an alternate list that is basically like, if you can add 6 months to anything you think you're going to accomplish, you're probably getting closer to some realistic goals. All those things, brand and these other things I want to do, are all great, but focus on generating revenue. That is the number one thing, and the thing you should always be focusing on, because from that, all the other things can happen. But without that, nothing happens. Reaching out to some potential clients, reaching out to some existing clients, some colleagues, and just really getting their input. And I think I would definitely look for a really low cost, effective kind of MVP style for generating the messaging and the brand.
And that is coming up next on Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show, so stay tuned. So, the big question is this: how are ambitious people like us, who don't have a lot of resources, did not go to Ivy League colleges, were not born into wealth, how do we become resourceful enough? Use our creativity, our dedication, and a little bit of crazy to bootstrap our way to realizing our dreams. Whether it is launching a new company, launching a new app, or making it to the top of the corporate ladder. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. We have created a tremendous community of bootstrappers, entrepreneurs, and professionals who are ambitious, resourceful, and want to get things done. We brainstorm, support, and help each other out. So come join us. Navigate to bootstrapping.group, join today, and get the Startup Founders Technology Accelerator video series absolutely free. If you enjoy this video, then do let us know by hitting that like button now. Or if you want us to improve our content, then go ahead and hit that thumbs down button and give us your honest feedback in the comment section below. Here at Tetanoodle, we are passionate about entrepreneurship, technology, and innovation. Every week, we bring you insightful and engaging videos, interviews, tips, tricks, and strategies to help you grow your business or rise in your corporate profession. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing, and do not forget to hit that bell icon so that you are notified when we publish new content. Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. I'm your host Manuj Aggarwal, and today we'll be talking with Ashley Bright. So Ashley is known as the message fixer, and we'll ask him what that means. So he's a father, entrepreneur, and a passionate storyteller. After 18 years pitching to Fortune 500 companies in the design and marketing industry, in 2013, he founded Ashley Bright Presents to teach experienced entrepreneurs and business leaders how to avoid messaging and communication mistakes that cost them millions of dollars. Microsoft, HonorHealth, and ASU are amongst the many clients who rely on Ashley's impact speaking method to help their leaders conquer fears, avoid costly mistakes, and get the money they need to succeed. Ashley says that he has learned that without irresistible messaging, great ideas, products, and services, they die. He fundamentally believes your message determines your results, and that is absolutely true. So let's welcome Ashley.
Hi there, Manuj. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So obviously you are a storyteller, so it only is fitting that let's start with your story and get to know you first. So can you take us down the memory lane and tell us how you got started? What was your experience working with Fortune 500 companies? So let's unpack all that.
Certainly. So I came out of college with a degree in advertising. And so I went into that, but I kind of was really fascinated at the time. This was the late 90s. I was fascinated with the internet and the whole sort of digital revolution that was happening. And so I actually joined agencies that were specifically focusing on sort of the new emerging digital platforms. Okay. And I loved it. And I quickly moved up the ranks. I became an art director and then a creative director. And in that role as a creative director, I was delivering presentations almost daily to a whole range of big Fortune 500 companies. And so in the course of doing that, I was learning what worked and what didn't. But more importantly, what I was noticing is that more often than not, the people on my team, smart, talented, passionate people, they didn't have the ability to communicate their ideas very well. And so as a result, they weren't getting buy-in. And so I kind of kept seeing this kind of in my periphery throughout the few years I was kind of tail end of that. I was there for 18 years in different agencies. And I finally kind of broke away from that in 2010. My family and I moved to Arizona. We wanted something completely different. We were up in Seattle. And that was kind of the beginning of Ashley Bright Presents. I was desperately looking for a way to take all of my knowledge and use it to really impact people more directly. It was really the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, if you will.
Awesome.
And then for the last 7 years, I have just been sort of, learning how to run a business, how to do a better job engaging and supporting my clients so they can succeed.
Awesome. So basically, you had some epiphanies, or you collected a lot of data, a lot of experience in your corporate job, and now you use it as your super weapon to help entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it really actually, there was an opportunity in about 2009. There was a local design school. This is up in Seattle. And they'd asked me to come and host a workshop. And they said to me, what do you want to host the workshop on? What's the topic? And, everyone there was, they were doing how to write a creative brief, or how to do branding or typography, all these sort of typical things. And somehow I arrived at communication and public speaking. And, what it forced me to do was kind of reverse engineer what I had started to do intuitively. I just learned over the years what worked. And so I started digging through all these different, notebooks and textbooks, and starting to figure out, what are the things that I do? How can I quantify that? And that was kind of that epiphany where I started to then teach this workshop, and all these different people were coming to talk to me. They were in corporate jobs, they were in leadership jobs, they were middle management, they were juniors, they were entrepreneurs, they were all over the place. And it really kind of back in 2009, that planted a seed of there's something interesting here. There's a real need. And I found this great satisfaction in helping people kind of clarify that. And so I think that was kind of one of my aha moments. And then the other one I had was just before I started my business in 2013, I was actually trying to be a sort of freelance creative director and designer. And I came to the realization that trying to do digital platforms and mobile apps and things like that when you don't have a team around you is really hard. And so that was one of those things I said, that public speaking thing, that might be something I could do, because it doesn't require all this technology. So those were kind of my two aha moments. One was public speaking, and the other one was practical. How do I run a business?
That's great. That's awesome. So so obviously it's intimidating for somebody who has been in in corporate environment for that long, to take the leap of faith and say, okay, you know what, I have enough in me to take it on my own. So what was that decision process like for you? When you decided, was it scary? Were you very, very clear on what's going to happen, or tell us a little bit about that?
I think two things. One, it wasn't scary, and two, I wasn't clear. And maybe the fact I wasn't clear is why it wasn't scary. Because I was, I hadn't been an entrepreneur. And so I think there was the level of, naivete about going into it and thinking that, it's just going to happen. I'm good at what I do, and it's just going to happen. And the last 7 years has sort of, been a daily wake up call of that's not the way it works. You need to be really just working away and hustling and multitasking and planning and, all the things, all the hats you have to wear as an entrepreneur. And it took me a while to kind of realize that. And there were definitely some painful discoveries along the way. And as I'm sure every entrepreneur has those sorts of stories. So I earned my scars, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So a lot of people in the audience, they're actually, they're actually somewhere in that step of their journey. They're trying to make a decision to go on their own. Maybe before we move on to the next topics, can you share a little bit of a nugget that helped you, or what kind of challenges did you face, or what can you share with any entrepreneur that they should watch out for? Any nugget that you want to share?
Sure, sure. I think one of the problems I had was that as you said, I'd come out of that corporate world. I was used to having that level of comfort and stability. And so I kind of naively assumed that was going to be the case. And so, I think those sorts of assumptions about kind of, how successful you're going to be, how you're going to get new clients, it was a very kind of optimistic, but I would say naive perspective. And so I think that was one of those really critical pieces for anyone that's sort of venturing into this entrepreneurial space to, like, it's great to have a list of all the optimism and the positivity and what we're going to do. But, I would recommend having an alternate list that is basically like, if you can add 6 months to anything you think you're going to accomplish, you're probably getting closer to some realistic goals. And so, that was probably the first one. And then I think, one of the things that I did in that 7 years is I think the first 2 years I was really gung-ho about learning. And so I was reading lots of books and I was listening to audiobooks. And so that's a really critical piece as well, is recognizing that you're always learning, and, you're not going to be able to do everything, but you should have some knowledge of how to do some of these things. And where I was going with this is I think after 2 years, that kind of fell off. I started to get some clients and I was starting to get kind of into my business, and that learning and that growth kind of fell off. And it's only in the last kind of year that I've really re-engaged in that. Going to conferences, just consuming materials almost like constantly. I'm out jogging, I'm listening to podcasts. And so those would be my two things, is I think, just check your assumptions, because it's going to be harder than you think, and always be learning, always be kind of just gathering information and learning new things.
That's great. Great advice. A lot of people, as you say, we get into the business and we get so busy, just sort of trying to turn the wheel that we have built, that we forget that, there's so much more out there. And if we just stay on the wheel, that wheel is going to expire someday and somebody else will replace that wheel with a bigger wheel.
That's true. And sorry, I'll add one third thing that, it's taken me years to kind of really understand this. But when I would meet with mentors over the years, many of them would point out to me that, revenue, like, is this thing that you're talking about, or this thing you're doing right now, is this generating revenue? And at the time, coming from sort of a design and marketing background, I was very enamored with kind of the process and having things be perfect. And so, it's been this realization of like, okay, all those things, brand and these other things I want to do, are all great, but focus on generating revenue. That is the number one thing, and the thing you should always be focusing on, because from that, all the other things can happen. But without that, nothing happens. And it, like I said, so a naive entrepreneur, it took me a while to sort of figure that out.
So true. I work in the startup space, and I hear that all the time. Like, so many people with brilliant ideas, and they get stuck. Oh, I need to raise money. So it's become a thing synonymous with startups, that they're always looking to make money rather than looking to raise money rather than looking to make money. So,
yeah. And it's something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs are in the startup space don't appreciate, is that, getting money is sort of, there's that, yay, I got money, this is great. But with that money now comes a whole new set of headaches, and I love this term. I heard some VC say to me, he said, when you invest in someone, or when they invest in you, you're asking them to share your dream. And if they don't have that same dream, if you're not aligned, then that money is actually going to be more of a burden than anything else. So for what it's worth.
Awesome. All right. So let's now move on to the next topic, but we'll still stay in that same time frame where you were, where you were getting into the entrepreneurial journey. Since you have this marketing and advertising background, and you're the message fixer, how was your experience of building an audience from the ground up? Like, did you bring your audience from your corporate job, or you had to build a brand new audience?
I had to build a whole new audience. And I think, again, that's one of those learnings. I think initially I tried to kind of tap into some of my existing network. And that was helpful. But I really ultimately realized that sort of they were not my target. And so I had to start learning how to kind of grow that additional audience. And, that was another big thing is I think that because I didn't have a background in business, I didn't write business plans. I didn't have this level of understanding. A lot of those early years was sort of organic growth. I was kind of, I would take this client and that client, and I was kind of a little bit all over the place. And so those were definitely some challenges I had, building that audience, and then is this the right audience, and how do I connect with this audience? And so it's been an ongoing challenge. In the last year and a half, 2 years, I feel like I've really kind of dialed it in, but it's 5 years in the making.
Yeah. So that's amazing because I struggle with messaging a lot myself. And when I talk to people, they get really, really paranoid that their messaging is not working. So what you just said resonated with me because it takes quite a bit of time to dial that in really well, right? So
it does, yeah.
Okay. So can we dig a little bit deeper into this? Like, what is the process of dialing it down? How do you figure out what message is resonating?
Well, it's interesting because, I said it was very organic. And so if I was to do it again, it's interesting. I met an entrepreneur about 3 or 4 years ago who was talking about creating an MVP for their product. And he was harping on the fact that so many companies go off and spend all their money on an MVP, but they haven't really validated if it's the right solution for this audience. And so, and he made the point that, you know what, a phone call and a notepad with a piece of, with a pencil, and you can learn a lot. And so I think if I was to do it again, I would have done some very kind of simple, low cost kind of testing. Reaching out to some potential clients, reaching out to some existing clients, some colleagues, and just really getting their input. Here's what I'm thinking of doing. Here's what I'm going to offer. Here's how I'm going to message it. And I could have, I think, saved myself a lot of time by doing that. But instead, I went down the path of building websites and building, social media graphics, and organically I would have someone reach out and say, oh, that, what you say there sounds like a designer. It doesn't sound like a business person, or, so if I was to do it again, I think I would definitely look for a really low cost, effective kind of MVP style for generating the messaging and the brand.
Great. Awesome. So that's another piece of good advice. But out of that, I noticed there was one question that came out for me, which again a lot of people struggle with, is how do you even figure out what your audience is? Because in order to validate that, you need to figure out who you want to target. And again, when I talk to people about any product or service, who is your customer, in general, like 80% people say anybody, right? So what is your process of sort of dialing it down to a level where you can actually have some meaningful conversation with the potential client and get some real feedback?
Yeah. So, again, I kind of did this the hard way. And so, if I can help someone avoid this, I will. But it was a lot of just organic growth. And so, in the beginning, someone would introduce me to a nonprofit, and then we'd start working together. And then someone would introduce me to a entrepreneur who's founding a company, and I'd work with them. And so it was all over the place. And, it took me time to start to figure out, to put it bluntly, going back to my original point about revenue, who's got money? Number one, who's got money? And number two, has the kind of wherewithal, and they're at a point in their business where they're recognizing the need for improving their messaging, whether it's for sales conversations or for investor conversations. And so, I think it's going to be different for different people in the way they go about it. But again, I think if you can, do those kind of very quick sort of lists or charts or whatever you will, where it's like, okay, here are the 5 audiences I'm thinking would be the right pick for my product, and start going through that list and like, okay, are they in the right mindset to buy, the place they're in their business? Do they recognize the value? Can they afford my services? And then there's probably a few other questions, but I think doing those 3 and doing that is immediately going to help get you in the right place. I think there's invariably going to be that need to kind of optimize and adjust. But I think as long as you're in the right place, that, less is more. And so, if you've got 10 people you're thinking might be your audience, pick 2. and like figure out a way to test that and like speak to them and get on the phone and ask your friends and, you know, do whatever you need to do. Another thing that's great about that is that it's an opportunity. If you reach out to people that are potential clients and you say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm not trying to sell you. I would just love to get some information from you. It's a great way for you to, one, learn the things you want to learn, but also you're kind of building that relationship and planting that seed, because now it's not intimidating for someone to talk to you because you're not going to try and sell them. Except you're building that knowledge and that relationship. And so, I mean, if you were to do that 10 times, you're going to A, learn a lot, and B, maybe you're going to get 2, 3, 5 clients out of it. You never know.
Exactly.
So that would be where again, if I was to do it all over again, that's where I'd start.
And then I think we exchange a few messages on this very topic about building relationships and understanding your, so I'll add one more thing, which I think has worked really well for me, is when I tell the person, as you said, like, I'm not selling anything, but the next step I take is I ask them what is their priority, and I actually give them something, a tangible result for free right there and then. And then what that does is it works two ways, right? One, I'm able to validate my capacity to serve that client, and then I can say, okay, this is the right audience or not. And then it also, in most cases, forces them to ask, what can I do for you?
That is a great point. That is a great point. I mean, it's interesting, you know, we talk a little bit about relationships. You know, when I meet new people, especially through LinkedIn, I'm often asking them, you know, questions that are allowing me to learn more about them. You know, I'm not saying, hey, you know, I need business, can you recommend me? I'm actually trying to demonstrate that I'm interested in learning about them. And so I'll usually lead with a question or two that kind of is going to elicit some response from them. And then from there, you know, we sort of start the dialogue, but I'm always focused on A, I want to learn about them. And B, I'll ask, hey, is there anything I can do to help you out? Is there anything I can, you know, can I introduce you to someone in my network? Can I, you know, whatever that is. And I feel like I think that's true of any relationship. If it was just one-to-one, we met them, you know, walking down the street, or we met them in a coffee shop, but something about business and like social media, I don't know. I think people are they're running through trying to kind of hit as many people as they can, and they're not stopping to like think about it. And so you end up with this just flurry of, you know, disengaged salespeople that are just trying to like get you to respond. And I'm not interested. I got 100 things going on. I don't, you know, you didn't show any interest in me. Why should I show an interest in you?
Exactly. And I think, if I recall correctly, there was some back and forth when we just connected. There was some back and forth about that as well between us, right?
Oh yeah. I think we were, you know, I always like to kind of like, you know, create that dialogue. And so it's about asking the right questions, also listening, you know, and it's not just about me. It's not about me talking. It's about me kind of trying to provide some value and find that connection with you.
And the reason why I'm bringing it up is not to get nostalgic, but to, you know, show by the way of some real world examples of how, you know, conversation can go from just a hello, hi to a meaningful conversation, right? Awesome. So now let's unpack the layers of messaging. So first, let's understand the title that you have given yourself, Message Fixer. How did that come about?
So it's interesting, you know, one of the things over the years I struggled with is when it comes to public speaking, when it comes to presentations, there are kind of 100 different interpretations of what that is and where the value lies. And, you know, is that a PowerPoint deck? Is that a speech? Are you a writer? Like, what is this? And, you know, I kind of struggled with that. And I was working with a business coach, and, you know, we'd have weekly calls. And in the course of one of these calls, he said something to the effect of, you know, you're the message fixer. I want you to be the message fixer. And it was like, you could see both of us, this little light bulb went on kind of above our heads on this call. And we were like, huh. And so, you know, it's not grandiose, but that's literally how it worked. Just having that conversation. And, you know, when you're not thinking about it, these words just come out, and it was like, boom, that's it. Because messaging is something that runs through, you know, PowerPoints, through public speaking, through running meetings, through networking, it's kind of ever present. And so, I latched onto that, and it's just become sort of my thing. You can see obviously behind me, and shirts and all of it. It's kind of my entry point.
Awesome.
For the kind, in fact, it's almost, I've used it on occasion at networking events, like I'm some sort of a superhero, where people will say, "Oh, I'm Bob. Who are you?" And I'm like, "I'm the message fixer." To which there's usually kind of a pause and a what?
Yeah.
And then I'll say, "Oh, I'm the message fixer," and then it's an automatic trigger for me to just talk about what I do.
Well, you should get a cape and put a M there.
I'm working on it. I need the cape. That's right.
So then you won't even have to say you are the message fixer, because
that's true. People will just come to me. They'll say, "Who's that guy in the cape?"
Exactly. All
He's
right.
either a superhero, a lunatic, or a rich investor. One of the two.
And you already got the cool glasses going, so you don't need a mask or anything like that. So you're already halfway through, huh?
Yeah, and all of this kind of came out of that conversation about the message fixer, and it was kind of like, what does that person look like? How does that person operate?
Awesome, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us, what are some of the typical challenges people face when they are trying to come up with their message?
Well, so usually for me, the entry point is for example, a client that will be in the technology space, which is very common for me. They're in a leadership position, and they are having to either go out and meet with clients for sales opportunities, or maybe they're going out to try and get investment. And very typically, we are kind of in our own industry. We know our language, our jargon, our stuff. And so the problem is that messaging is something that, because we all do it, we all talk, we all interact, we can all hold conversations, we don't realize that, when you're going out to meet with a group of people that don't speak tech, that are not steeped in that language, in that space, you need to have some real clarity and simplification about the messaging. You want to be very much kind of speaking to it from a benefit standpoint in accessible language for them. Because ultimately what you're trying to do is not demonstrate how smart you are, but demonstrate the value and the benefit to them if they want to engage with you. And hopefully through those conversations and through whatever meetings and materials you've supplied, you've demonstrated your expertise and knowledge in this space. So that shouldn't be the question. It's really about how can that benefit you. And so that's very typical. And so that'll then end up being something. It'll start with a presentation they're doing on stage, but then that messaging will start to then filter down through their organization, and it will become the way their frontline people talk about what they do, or their salespeople, or even the way they do onboarding with new employees. Sometimes I'll work with more experienced, businesses, and they're sitting there saying, how do we create sort of a purpose story so that we're able to attract the right type of employees that want to join us on this kind of journey that we're doing with this organization.
Got it.
And so the power of that messaging is huge.
Yeah, that's great. Now I want to ask one more question here. Is small startups or solopreneurs, it's very easy. It's very easy to change your identity overnight. Like I send a message right now, and in 5 minutes I can completely change it and test it out. How does that work for larger corporations? How does that identity shift happen? Because obviously, let's say a company like Coca-Cola, let's say if they want to even change the color of their, their from red to blue, it will be a humongous process, right? So do you have any insights working with larger corporations? How does that work?
I do and I don't, because one of the things that I try to steer clear of is, oftentimes what I'll do there, it does touch on kind of branding. For these organizations. But I usually will try to avoid getting into kind of that as my thing. I have others in the industry that is their thing. And so if I work with the client and, I can see early on that like they are sort of almost, they haven't gotten far enough yet with what they're talking about for me to really engage, I may say, hey guys, why don't we step back? And I want to introduce you to this partner of mine, and they're going to help you really get this to a foundational level. And then from there, we'll kind of build upon it. Or sometimes it'll work reverse. I'll help them with their messaging, and then they see the success, and then it starts working backwards. In which case, again, I'll kind of make some recommendations. and maybe do some introductions to the right people. But, one of the things I've learned over the last 7 years is trying to kind of be very aware and comfortable with where I play. Mm-hmm. And so I can speak to the branding, I can speak to advertising, I can speak to general marketing. Okay. But I try to stay on that kind of public speaking and kind of, what are you saying with your words? I see. Is kind of where I like to play.
Awesome. We all understand that marketing, messaging, advertising, a lot has to do with getting your audience to connect with your story and invoking certain type of emotions. Mm-hmm. So how do you tackle that problem? How do you get the audience? Like, it's one thing to have the audience notice you. It's another thing to get them actually engaged and stop in their tracks and say, okay, you know what? I need to like really stop what I'm doing and listen to this or watch this or whatever. So how do you bring that magic in?
Well, I think it depends obviously on the medium or the platform. So I think if you're in a public speaking situation, it's a little different dynamic than when you're on social media. Mm-hmm. But the thread that runs through all of it is, an authentic voice, first of all, and then utilizing emotion and story is powerful. And so, for example, when I work with clients that are going to be going up on stage or pitching to an investor, I'll often have them spend time really developing that opening story. And that story could be both illustrating the problem that they solve and who's affected by it, while at the same time building up their kind of credibility and trust as an authority in this space. Awesome. And so that might be kind of one place where we use story. When it comes to social media, it may be, oftentimes I find people want to lead with the positive, lead with the benefit of what we do and what we do for our clients. Yeah. But, that's not as powerful as leading with the negative. Mm. So if I say to someone, your messaging problem is going to burn down your business, and that's the first line they see in a post, then that's usually, if that's where they're at and they're sort of thinking about messaging or communication or the challenges they're having, that piques an interest. Right. And then I will sort of then go and sort of unpack that and what does that mean? And so a lot of it is just, I think being highly aware of who's your audience. I mean, that's really the thread for all of this. Who's your audience? And so if you're in a room presenting to a group of people and they're not aware of your business, they're not steeped in your industry, then that's where story and emotion is this universal tool that gets people in. And then similarly, if I'm on social media and I know who my audience is, and I recognize like, hey, these are the pain points they have. And so I lead with things that immediately are going to like resonate with them. It may not resonate with 80% of the other people that may be seeing my stuff, but if this is who I'm trying to talk to, then I'm very aware of that. And I think that is where a lot of the problems come, is that people just, as you said, who do you market to? Oh, I'm marketing to everybody. Yeah. And it's like, well, then you're just going to have a very general message. And I mean, unless you're selling, I don't know, toilet paper or something that everybody needs. I mean, even those companies, they distinguish, they have niches, they have their price points, they know who they're going after. They're not going after everybody. Yeah,
that's cool. All right. So we are a little bit over time, but one more question here is because I'm on this like, a weird journey of turning things into a positive. So what you just said, obviously pain-based messaging works, but do you think that if that message can be turned into what if I 10x your business in 10 days without spending blah, blah, blah. Do you think that may resonate well or will be more powerful, or the pain-based will be more powerful?
I think, in my experience, the pain-based. And when I say pain-based, it's not that it's all dreary and negative. Mm. It's just using that as a trigger to capture people's attention. And then immediately we shift into unpacking. Like, okay, I said, your messaging problem is going to burn down your business. Mm. And then I'll get into like, well, what do I mean? Well, messaging is blah, 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 blah. And it touches on these things. But if you fix it, it can increase sales and increase investment. And so I get to that positive, but I think it's just much more interesting. I think if we think about the basics of human interaction and storytelling, if I come to you and it's all positive, 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 it's less compelling than if I sort of come to you and I say, man, I was struggling. Oh, don't get me started. I was struggling. It was so hard. And then this thing happened and it changed everything. I was transformed, like, look at how I 10x'd my business. There's a much more compelling element there. And I think as human beings, we naturally grab onto that because we're all human beings. We all see that drama. We all can relate.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been a very deep, interesting conversation. And I hope a lot of people actually listen to this multiple times, because if they go through the steps we just talked about, they can actually get to a very, very compelling messaging on their own as well. But, obviously, they will benefit by working with you. So before I let you go, can you tell us how they can reach out to you?
Certainly. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I think this was wonderful. I mean, we've exchanged messages, but this is great to have this one-on-one conversation. All right. So the first way is, if you look for this hashtag, the message fixer, that's how you can find me on social media. And then from there, if you want to go to my website, it's themessagefixer.com. And for anyone who is an entrepreneur, a startup, one of the things that I would recommend you start developing sooner rather than later is your founder story. And so to that end, if you go to my website and just fill out the little contact form, and in the message say founder story, then I will send you a PDF guide that'll show you how to, A, what is a founder story, B, why it's so effective, and C, how to create your own. And so I would love to be able to do that for your audience. So just hit my website and fill out the form and I'll send that to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your generosity. I'm going to put that link in the show notes so that people can reach out to you easily.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And I hope your audience got some value.
Oh, for sure. Thank you so much. And that's all for now. Until next time. Now, if you're an entrepreneur or a career professional, then I invite you to join our growing community. Navigate to bootstrapping.group. As a welcome bonus, you will get the Startup Founders Technology Accelerator video series and Mastering Your Inner Game video series absolutely free. This series of short videos address some core issues which are instrumental in helping you move forward in your business or career. The videos are yours to view and share for free. No obligations or strings attached. Except for one, you have to take action and implement it. So join us today, navigate to bootstrapping.group. If you want more engaging videos and insightful interviews with industry's thought leaders, then check out the other videos we have picked for you. The link is right there. And if you want to be notified about our new content, please do consider subscribing to our channel.